Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and very good morning. Welcome to our second session of the day, which I feel is a very important session, the roadmap of achieving excellence of higher education. And with this session, I would like to call to our three distinguished speakers actually to the stage. First one is Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Dr. Khoo Kim to be our panelist. Second one is Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Dato Sri Panglima Dr. Abu Hassan Othman, who is the chairman of Malaysian's Qualification Agency. And the third one, I think, is already on the stage. Professor Dato Dr. Ibrahim Ahmad Bajunid. Gentlemen, may I have you on the stage? Thank you. Okay, before I start, I think some formality here. Let me introduce all the three speakers, even though I think all of them need no introduction, actually, especially in the country. For the first one is Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Dr. Khoo Kim. What can I say about the man? For me, personally, he's my guru. He was my tutor. I used to work with him closely at History Department, seems ages ago, but he's still strong. And he's, for me, personally, he's a national asset. He's our national historians, involved in very much in not only rewriting Malaysian history, but I think most importantly, to look at what is important for us as a nation. And Professor Khoo still strongly active until today. Currently, he is a Chancellor of KDU University College, and also involved with a lot of institutions, being a board members and actively giving his ideas in our mainstream media and also as a public intellectuals. Our second speaker will be Tan Sri Datuk Sri Panglima Dr. Abu Hassan Othman. Is a very long and distinguished career as an educationist and also as a scholar. I think he held various positions as the one that strongly have a strong influence and experience being a managers of knowledge. I think he was a Deputy Dean and Dean at Faculty of Art and Social Sciences, University Kebangsaan Malaysia, and also as a Deputy Vice-Chancellor of University Kebangsaan Malaysia. And currently, he's still serving the education sector, I believe, as a chairman of Meteor, Dr. Berhad, and also as a chairman board of governors, YTL, International College of Hotel Management. The third speaker, I think, it was introduced just now, but let me put this about Professor Dr. Ibrahim Ahmad Bajunid. I think he's one of the great public intellectuals, thought leaders when it comes to intellectuals and education in Malaysia. So I think for all the speakers, the rule is simple. Everyone get 15 minutes in free flow. We will discuss about three major things, I think, in the session. The first one, we are talking about what happens currently in Malaysian higher education. It's the merging of the universities. I think what's the impact and challenges, what we learn when we merge the two ministry. I'm sorry, when we merge the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Higher Education, what we learn from previous and what I think the way forward for us. Secondly, we're going to talk about Malaysia as an education hub. Where are we now in that sense? I think that is one of the biggest questions. What should we do next in that regard? And finally, I think everybody talking about national education blueprints, which was still in the consultation process, I strongly believe. So where and how can we really make the blueprints successful adventure for us, for the future, and then for the success for us as a nation? So with that, I will give the floor to Professor Khoo, followed by Dr. Prof. Abu Hassan and also Prof. Ibrahim.
Chairman, fellow panelists, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I won't take up too much time because I'm given only 15 minutes. My lectures in the university always go beyond 1 hour per lecture. And since the first speaker has mentioned that history is very important, and if I were to tell you about history, of course, this session will not end. But I need to bring up a few things that most of you are probably not aware of. I first went to school at the end of 1946, and I have never had a break with education since then. I want to tell you how the University of Malaya was founded. It's very important, because when the British decided, by the way, the British decided that they would pull out of this country in 1942. So if you hear people say how they fought for independence and all, don't believe them. Because the British decided that they would pull out, and they delayed pulling out because the communists were threatening to take over the country, which they did for 2 weeks at the end of August 1945 when the Japanese surrendered. So the British set up a Carr-Saunders committee, because if they were to pull out, then the university, Malaya then must produce its own leaders. So they decided to turn the Raffles College and the King Edward VII College of Medicine into a university. So they set up the Carr-Saunders Commission to investigate whether these two were ready to become a university. But Carr-Saunders Commission decided in London that they would recommend only a university college, not a university. Then they went to Singapore. And then at one dinner, they met some of the graduates of Raffles College at the King Edward VII College of Medicine. And believe it or not, at that dinner, in one night, they decided, they were so impressed by the graduates that the University of Malaya would be a full-fledged university. And how the University of Malaya was born in 1949. And then the split took place in 1962. And since then, the National University of Singapore has been going up. We have been going down. People tell me that Singapore students are so much cleverer and so on. I say my foot, because I studied there when the University of Malaya was in Singapore, and we studied together with the Singaporeans. They never beat us. We were the ones leading the university, not the Singaporeans. But today, you see, we do not compete anymore. I'm afraid maybe because I have been a sportsman, I believe that even in the field of higher education, you must always compete, not among yourselves, but against the best in the world. Because I was in sports, not in recreation. Those who take part in recreation have no idea what competition means. And if you're not willing to compete, you cannot say that you are good. But today, we do not compete. Even in games, we do not compete. Look at how poorly we have fared in sports. In soccer, we beat Korea 2 times to compete, to qualify for the World Olympics. Today, we are so happy when we win at SEA Games level. We took part in the Olympics in 1956, before we became independent. In 1950, our weightlifters came up top at the British Empire Games with 2 golds, 1 silver, 1 bronze. And if they had gone to the Helsinki Olympics in 52, they would have come back with a gold medal at least. But we had no Olympic Council then. We were such a great nation. Today, we talk a lot. But as the old saying goes, words are not deeds. You have to perform. You have to compete. In history, that's what we did. You see. When my poor late colleague, R.R. Bonnet, was not happy that Penang people were celebrating Founders' Day every year. Francis, like founder of Penang. So he wasn't very happy. So for his MA, he decided to go into the whole subject. And sure enough, he found that there was no agreement signed between the Sultan of Kedah and the East India Company to give away Penang to the British. Francis like took Penang by force. And I can now prove to you, although I have not written on this subject, Singaporeans will be so angry with me, I think, that Stamford Raffles cheated to take Singapore for the British. So we always competed. I wrote on J.W.W. Birch because they all said that Birch was a Victorian moralist who was sent to Perak to clean up the Perak's audience table. I found that he had been guilty of corruption in Singapore. He was the colonial secretary. So instead of punishing him by sacking him, they sent him to Perak. And then he did some rubbish there and got into trouble. So we have always to be dissatisfied with what is already there. But it is important to distinguish between change for the better and change for the sake of change. I'm very sad that so many things in this country which used to be excellent have been changed. You take teacher training. If you don't have marvelous teachers, you cannot have marvelous schools. You can have any kind of syllabus, it's useless. But today, what teacher training colleges do you have that you can be proud of? There was a time when there were so many, even 2 in Britain, apart from 1 in Penang, 1 in Kota Baru, 1 in Johor Bahru, 1 in Kuala Lumpur. What do we have today? And even before the teacher training colleges, the so-called normal trained classes were so good. They produced excellent teachers. Teachers who really knew how to work with the pupils. Not helping them to score A's in examinations. Nowadays, they all can score A's very easily because the examination papers are so easy. I have already told so many times. You let me set the history questions and see how many will score A. Those days in history, it was so difficult to get even 70. Today, they can score 90 plus. But most of the pupils today do not know the history of their own schools. Some of the finest schools in the country are today unknown because they no longer produce the kind of students they used to. Oh, you'll be surprised. Professor Bajunid said just now, if you know the history, you'll be surprised what this country was like. I asked Kuala Lumpur people, how did Kuala Lumpur get its name? Nobody knows. They tell me some nonsense about some muddy water and all that. I say, in Malay language, when you have a kuala, what must you have? Kuala Linggi, Sungai Linggi. Kuala Pilah, Sungai Pilah. Kuala Kangsa, Sungai Kangsa. Kuala Terengganu, Sungai Terengganu. Kuala Lumpur, Sungai Lumpur. But where is Sungai Lumpur? I can produce you a map to show you that in 1872, what you call Sungai Gombak was called Sungai Lumpur. Then the name was changed by 1875. If not, today Kuala Lumpur would have been called Sungai Gombak. Kuala Gombak. Yeah? The history is very important. Look at the way they're quarreling in the newspapers every day. They don't even know what the Constitution is, how the Constitution has come to be what it is. Politicians say, oh, they never did all these things. All those things were already ready for them. Because they sat down and they agreed among themselves. And they call that social contract. But that's not the meaning of social contract. Social contract is the agreement between the state and the people. What we received in 1957 was already planned by the British. That's what Hugh Clifford said in 1927 when referring to the Malay states. They were, they are, and they must remain Malay states. These states were when our cooperation in government was first invited, Mohammedan monarchies, and such they are today. We have neither the right nor the desire to vary the system of government. So 1957 was what he had declared in 1927. And so many things that the people who call themselves Malaysians, they don't even know the meaning of one Malaysia. They get very excited. What is a nation? They don't know. I say, what is the difference between nationality and ethnicity? They don't know also. Everything they don't know. The whole wide world, there is no country with 2 kings. Malaysia has 9. Why? Don't know. And they laugh. Ha ha, I also don't know. No, I think it's a very sad thing. Education means not just scoring A's in examination. Lots of people can score A's in examinations. I know of school children today who memorize essays, because they can more or less tell what topics will come out in the examination. So they memorize about 10 essays. And then one of them is correct and they score A. Because we today tell them that the answers are already decided upon. In those days, never. We were always asked to explain, to give reasons, to justify, then they think. Even in sports, I look at the way the people play football and badminton, it's very sad. You know that we have a very long history of badminton? The emergency was declared in 1948. In early 49, we became world champion in badminton. Then we were still champion in 52, champion in 55. Then the first generation of players left, and 58 we lost to Indonesia. But we could not beat one American chap called Dave Freeman in 1949. And we came home and we did so many things to change the whole style of play, build new badminton halls, but today it's all forgotten. So when they play singles, they play like ping pong, tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock like that. That's not the way singles is played. And football, possession, football. Push the ball here, push the ball, push back to the goalkeeper. So boring. Whereas those days you have a player like Maradona who could dribble 6, 7 people to score a goal. Awang Baka of Singapore who could score 14 goals in one match. 14, 1-4. Where do you find them now? How come this was possible? Because people used to think. Today they're all robots. Everything is science. Even must play scientific football. I said, do you know the meaning of science? The essence of prediction is what science is all about. So if you play scientific football, your opponents can predict how you play. You don't want to play scientific football. You want to bamboozle your opponent. We always kept them guessing. They think we're going to pass here, we pass there instead, you see. Now it's very predictable. So boring, football matches. I've been watching these international games, so boring. So education means the mind must be developed. And every teacher, every lecturer should know his or her pupils or students. I talk to my students. I never said they must make an appointment to see me. They could knock at my door and come in. But today, they don't do that. Today, the lecturers also don't have rooms. They don't have rooms anymore. Those days, each of us had a room, and we talked to the students. And we were always saying science and technology. I said, but human beings create science and technology, not the other way around. Can you imagine if a proposal by a history student, history lecturer for a project is submitted? It's very often commented upon by science graduates at the top there. What does a physics fellow know about history? If I were asked to comment on physics and chemistry, I would never do it because I know I do not know the subject. But today, no. So if you ask me, having been associated with education since the end of 1946, I am not happy with what has happened. We were world class in education. Never mind whether people call us the hub of education or not. Today, of course, we are the hub of education because so many people from so many countries want to come here, see? And some of them do nonsense when they come here. And I don't think this merging of the two ministries is a good thing today. Because today, there are so many institutions of higher learning. So the Ministry of Higher Education should concentrate on them. Whereas at one time, when there were only a few public universities, then the two ministries were merged. So they were merged at the wrong time. So it's very important that we must think development of the mind, not how many A's you score. In China, they used to score A's in those days. You know how the Chinese used to learn? Even today, they are still very good. The Chinese Mandarin examinations, all based on memory. And when I went to school, I had classmates from Chinese schools who could memorize the Oxford Pocket Dictionary. So if you have an examination system in which you allow students to memorize, you will never beat the Chinese students. Imagine memorizing the Oxford Pocket Dictionary. I gave up science and mathematics because I had to do lab work until 6:30, whereas I wanted to play football. See? So I switched. But see, I was a science student. I never did history. And I hated history until I went to university. I had some of the best lecturers, some of the very best. I wanted to do English literature, but the lecturers were terrible, insisting we should answer the way they dictated. Shakespeare is the world's greatest playwright. I say, have you read plays in Chinese, in Japanese, in other languages? If not, how can you compare and say that Shakespeare is the greatest? If you have only read plays in English, you are not in a position to make that statement. So, in the end, I didn't do English literature. I did history. and I have no regret. Because today I have found Malaysia to be really a most fascinating country for the study of history. You'll be surprised what a wonderful country this is. And history data can be found in Chinese, in French, in Portuguese, in Dutch, in German, in Japanese, in Thai. But today, it is very difficult to find hard-working young historians. That's the problem. I have told so many people to go to Thailand and read the Thai documents to learn about the Malay Peninsula. And the poor scholar in Singapore University in those days, Dr. Ian McGregor, he went to South Africa to collect Portuguese material on Malaya. He caught a disease and died at the age of 27. All his sources today in Portuguese are in the National University of Singapore. Nobody has used them. See, as I said again, Malaysia is a wonderful country. But Malaysians sometimes, because the country is blessed by God, we have everything, Small country with 20 over million people. We used to be #1 exporter of rubber. Now still #1 exporter of oil palm. We have gold. We had gold at one time. We still have a lot of tin, but nobody dares to remove Kampar town in order to mine tin. We have the largest flour in the world. Now, the hardest wood in the world is found in Malaysia. Of course, not in Peninsula, but in Sarawak. Harder than teak wood. Blessed by God. Of course, we have a little bit of haze, but no volcanic eruption and so on. Malaysians don't have to work for 2 months and they're still okay. Singaporeans, if they don't work for 2 weeks, they're in trouble. So I hope our education system will help the young to know more about the country, to love their country, and to be able to do more about their country. Thank you.
Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, very good afternoon. Yang Mulia Dato Pemersi, distinguished panels, and distinguished participants. It's a great privilege and honor to be here this afternoon to share some notions of what I have in mind based on experience I've developed the last 40 years in education. And I'm privileged also to sit with my former professor. I took history year 1, Muslim layer. And here you are, still active mind-wise, and that's the product of wisdom, intelligence, and brilliance. So I hope Malaysians can learn from those and move on to become a high-income country by 2020 by producing more of this brain power that needs to develop the country for now in the future. And I have a privilege to be with Professor Ibrahim. I know him for a long time, even when he was studying at Harvard. I had the opportunity to visit him at Harvard at the time. And of course, Dr. Hamidin is a known scholar who has been now in charge of a fast-growing university, private university. So for today, I've been assigned to talk and relate to the 3 elements as mentioned earlier, into the integration of MOHE, Ministry of Education, the Education Hub, and the blueprint in education. But let me just begin by saying that there is nothing wrong with our country. We have built excellence capabilities to develop strategies, planning, and printing it over a period of time since we achieved independence. And yes, we have achieved success based on those strategic planning, and so on and so forth. But we have also problems in terms of enforcement, implementations of those strategic plans. Sometimes it did not reach the objectives what it was designed for. And therefore, I think hopefully this time, the new blueprint in education will build up the next generation of Malaysians based on what Tan Sri Khoo says. What we're looking today that we have been successful in building the mind through our education system. We produce brilliant students with 21 A's. And we're very proud telling the whole nations that we have produced that brain power. But that's not the issue. The issue is whether we're able to build the strength of their heart, the emotional intelligence. Ask ourselves, have teachers ask themselves, have parents ask themselves, have the community ask themselves, are we successful or yet to be successful developing the other component of human development? If you have not yet, then we're going to have more problems, as we've seen today across the nations, from drugs to social problems to killings and so on and so forth. And we have not yet developed. We have not reached there yet. We are just about to reach that plane. But along the way, we're already seeing the remnants of seriousness in terms of social problems. Why? Because we have been very successful in terms of developing the mind. There's no problem yet. We have sent our people to the space. And you name it. We have sent people around the world by ship. We have sent people on Everest. We have all the wind power. But where you look on the ground, so what I'm saying is that let's look to the ground. And I hope I can share with you, because you're all bright, brilliant people in educations. You know what it's all about. I don't have to lecture what it's all about. But let me share three important components, purpose of education. One is informs public understanding. Ask ourselves, have the public really understood our education system today across the board? Yes, we have gone to public presentation of blueprints. Yeah, that's the best so far, I think, where the Ministry of Education has gone public to get feedback from various sources to build up that blueprint. And hopefully the new blueprint would enable to produce the other side of the human body for the future. Because the challenges which will be more difficult, be more challenging. So that's why, have we informed the public? Have our education system been successful in informing the public? I throw the question to you for the answer, for you to ponder and bring back to institutions and at the coffee shops or whatsoever. Number one, have we cultivated public taste towards our education system? Have we or not? So, my answer, yes, to some extent. A lot more to be done. Because in today's development, societal development, we have civil society growing very fast. You've seen in the country, all over the world. That's the future trends of the world, because people are getting more and better educated. Parents are getting more and better educated. The public are getting more and better educated. And therefore, there'll be a lot of changes in terms of their mindsets, their value system, their demands, their wants, their needs, and so on and so forth. So these are issues which will impact our education system. And then, of course, the third one, the most critical, is contribution to nation building. Yes, we've been doing that. We are all products of education. We all are here today. Products of education contributing towards nation building. And I have the privilege to share with you, as Khoo said, in the young days of University of Malaysia, which was small, about 3,000 students, or 4,000 at most, when you were there. And who were our professors then? You can name a few. I still remember my year one was Professor Khoo, young lecturer, teaching history. And there was this Professor Dubsky, I think, teaching the book Dubsky. And there was this Professor Pluvier from Netherlands, teaching history, I'm sure. And there is Professor Wang Gangwu, and Ali Takdir Shabana. They're all, and of course Najib Said Hussein Alatas. So these are the scholars, and many more. Those are just a few type Othman and so on and so forth. And these are the scholars at that time. Without the resources we have today. They don't have the resources that we have today in terms of libraries, in terms of computers, in terms of what you name it. But yet they are able to produce the right brain power, the right mindset, produce students, and who are able to manage life, to manage institutions, to manage industries, and so on and so forth. So, what do? We nurture, we train students. We produce, yes. Have we achieved the best? My answer is not yet. We still have a lot of work to do. So therefore, there are full of challenges for education today, be it the lower primary and also higher education in general. So what are the challenges? I've got 8 areas in which I think, I'm sure you understand it. We talk about it, we listen in conferences, but the bottom line is, what happens after that? Who translates it? Who does it? So, number 1, broadening public appreciation on the work of teachers and the academy, lecturers. Even the civil service doesn't understand sometimes the work of lecturers. If lecturers want to demand higher, they said no. So understanding the professions of the teachers and community are very critical, and appreciating so that they are the custodians of brain development, professional development, knowledge development in the future, now in the future. So, and I personally feel that the academy and the teachers are not 100% understood yet. We want to be 120% understood. Then the rhetorical components will develop as we go along, and I think able to produce the right environment for excellence. 2, increasing our understanding of the needs of the workplaces. And this is the critical points. Every day we hear graduates unemployment, 50,000, 40,000, whatsoever, lacking this, lacking that. The bottom line is, I have the opportunity to work in both worlds now. I was in the public, now in the private. I've attended board meeting. This is a big giants meeting. There's no small board. They are global players. They have business all over the world. And then you begin to understand their mindset, the kind of human beings they want to work in the companies, the kind of people they will recruit. What do I learn? Basic. There's no quarrel with knowledge. As Khoo mentioned, we are excellent. There's nothing wrong with the knowledge we, transmit to our students. But those are not enough. So we have yet to strengthen the base of developing the skills. These have been shouted all the time, but whether it is done in the curriculum, in the institutions, and related to what happenings in the workplace. For example, in engineering, some industries have gone to apply much more modern, sophisticated engineering machines. But do institutions of learning have those machines in the university of similar? If not, then the graduates are already one step behind. So upon graduation, they have to enter the industries. What happened? Industries have got no time for training. They are just entrepreneurs to reach the bottom line. What is the bottom line? Profit. So we can't produce and be productive in this company, you are irrelevant. And therefore, we don't need to employ you. So that is the challenges. So it is very critical for universities or even schools to understand the workplaces. Take, for example, public and private schools. You see the difference, how they train the younger minds in the private and public schools towards understanding the workplaces and so on and so forth. And thirdly, of course, becoming more effective learning organizations that we all know. That's one, just now Prof. Ibrahim mentioned MQA. I'm not going to say details of what MQA because it's all published, but basically, the establishment of LAN in 1997, and later on, and at that time there were 2. LAN was just to audit private universities and university colleges. And then the Ministry of Education, Higher Education established CAD to look at public institutions of higher learning to audit, to quality assure. And then in 2005, the Malaysian government, the cabinet decided to join amendment the two become Malaysian Quality Agency. Since then, it's about, 13 years now, to has been able to develop strength in terms of quality assurance for higher education. And let me share with you, although I'm new to the organization as chairman, but MQA is not a police inspector. It will never be. It's just partners to ensure that institutions achieve the kind of standards, quality that are equivalent, if not better, with the best quality assurance agencies in the world. Then I can share with you. So whatever is done there is equivalent, if not better. And we've improved some of those quality assurance of Australia and so on and so forth. Make it better, as I mentioned. Whatever we learn from others, we pick it up, we remodify, adjust it, make it better to suit our needs, our own local enterprise. So increasing our, becoming more effective learning organization. That's the purpose. Why we do auditing, why we quality assured. It's a very tremendous, difficult task, challenging task. For those who have been involved in it will know the kind of work, as you've seen the corridor of power, how they're going, what time they sleep. And so I remember, Ibrahim will still remember when we did. And see, these are the challenges. But I can share with you that what is being done today is in the right direction to turn Malaysia into a center of excellence as an education hub. That has been proven. The numbers of foreign students coming in increasing, but of course, we also don't want the bad ones coming. So that's another story. And so these are critical elements. Integrating assessment planning, those are internal, the fourth one. And the fifth one, of course, enhancing collaboration with the community. Of course, universities are doing it, but I think it should be done more, because that's the only way to leverage students towards understanding the communities and engage in the kind of work they do. And that's where the value system will, being developed, the students be able to relate what is transpires in the classroom and what really happens in the public, in the community. So many universities are doing it now, but I think it should become our culture. It may be part of our curriculum in terms of training and learning. And of course, the sixth ones, we are recognizing that everyone institution are teachers. That's critical, and I agree with you, because teachers are the one who can mold the heart. And we don't have, we need to train and produce teachers. Of course, they are lecturers, but are they teachers? So the most critical point is to enhance the building up of the teaching elements in the mindset of the lecturers, so that they're able to understand country. History, for example, is a critical component. A civilization of a nation is built on history. So if the younger generations don't understand, for example, if we ask students today, who is Tun Tan Cheng Lock? Some of them, who is Tan Cheng Lock? Who is, some may not understand who is Tunku Abdul Rahman? Tun Abdul Razak? I don't know. So if the younger generation of today have not developed and understand who is Sambantan, I don't know. But these are, who is Tun Ismail? So these are samples of elements that are built in the education system that ensure that we understand. The old generation understand today, no problem. And that's where the One Malaysia comes in. Because you acquire, you inherit, you put in your heart, not in your mind. Because your mind tomorrow you forget about it. But the heart will remain. So that is the critical element. So, and of course, seven is attention and resource, and attention to resources and leadership. But this is critical. No institutions can achieve excellence without sufficient quality resources and excellent leadership. I have no time to elaborate, but those are critical. And we need leadership, not only from the top. If the top is only strong, but the bottom line begins to astray along the way, then institution will not achieve anything. The leader may be the best, but the sub-leaders down the road, as it trickles down the road, the end one is the most useless one. That's the one is critical that meet the students. So those are, and of course, last year brought training and vision of excellence. So these are ingredients which are built in the three components. You want to be a center of excellence, hub education. You want the blueprint education is building towards that to be excellent. Of course, they've changed. They have introduced new things. It's very good. And then, of course, as I agree with Khoo, education institutions getting bigger and bigger. We have now 80 over universities. More are coming, including private and foreign campuses. We have 400 over colleges. And just imagine, it's not easy. And all must be attuned towards quality assurance. If not, we are not going to produce the skills that enable to meet the targets of 2020. And after all, the country needs at least to achieve 50% skilled labor by 2020. We have now 28%. We still have 22% to move. And I know Tan Sri Anwar is in the committee. So human resources looking at this labor, requirement for the future. So these are critical components that we have to ensure it can be achieved by 2020. So with that, I think I've taken more than 15 minutes. So I hope I shared with you. I have posed a lot of questions. I can go on with MQA, but it's become academic. But if you have questions later on, I can respond. But hopefully I have shared with you some of the talking points that would enable you to go back and think. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much. I have 12 points. But first, the humility of Professor Emeritus Khoo Kim and also Tan Sri Abu Hassan, when Professor Khoo Kim said, I know I do not know. And he doesn't pretend he knows when he does not know. Unlike people who take the stand, I know everything, I am in power. So this humility is actually the mark of academia. So once we lose this humility and we lose heart, we focus on the competencies and not the holistic mind, heart, soul, etc., then we lose the real purpose of academic leadership. I buy lots of books written by Professor Emeritus Khoo Kim. One favorite one of mine is Malay Society. To understand Malay Society, we read that book, and then I give to so many people all over the world that book, Malay Society. With Tan Sri Abu Hassan, I used to invite him when I was in Institute Aminuddin Baki to give talks on many things, including those days there was this issue about religious deviance. And among other things related to his doctoral thesis, which I registered in my mind, is when he speaks about the various kinds of ideal culture, normative culture, empirical culture, and aesthetics culture. And until now, I do not see that we're not too empirical. We are always advocacy-driven, maybe a little social conscience, but empirical, evidence-based decision-making is lacking. And aesthetics culture, still a long way to go. With Professor Hamidin, our very young intellectual who's setting up the equivalent but different than the Kennedy School of Government. We were together in the Asia-Europe Institute when he was the leader there, when we were trying to understand and push the agenda of lifelong learning. And so, and in front here, there's so many people whom I respect in their own rights, leaders who contribute so significantly in our joint enterprise. So the 12 points are, number one, Malaysia has now a middle class, a large middle class. But what are the attributes, characteristics, drives of middle class? Almost every family now, middle class family, they have people in the professions. So professional culture, the meaning of the professions and professional cultures exists not in the 6,000 Malaysian families, but at least in the 1,000 over 2,000 Malaysian families. Each family is about 6-7 people on the average. Our challenge is the challenge of graduate unemployment. The statistics are out. We are overproducing, and there's a moratorium on medical schools, pharmacies, nurses, teachers, and in some other fields. When we use the World Health Organization standards of the number of doctors to the number of inhabitants in the country, we are now getting to be okay because we are going to be a developed nation. But the challenge is we might be having people with degrees who will be driving buses or doing some other jobs, because while we focus on academia and quality in academia, we really, leadership at institutional level and sectoral level, really, we do not align our policies while we have blueprints. Let me give you an example. There are 13 million jobs in Malaysia, about 1.4 million civil service jobs. The multinational companies are only about 9%. The rest are small. Out of the 600,000 companies, they range between employing people, 12 people in one company to 200 people in one company. And where are our graduates going? See, at one point of time when we were smaller and the government control and there was clear matching of jobs to the graduates, it was okay. But now there's no clear matching. There are more and more people, and we now have the policy of the democratization of higher education, and we want to compete and at least benchmark against Korea, where 8 out of 10 will have, of the cohort, will have higher degrees, higher qualifications. So we are going to have more and more people highly educated and no jobs, who are going to create the jobs. At one point of time, Tan Sri Rafida Aziz was focusing a lot on FDI, foreign direct investment. So the companies will come over, but what do? They set up factories, and most of the factory workers are of the lower middle class, or the working class. Look at Bayan Lepas, look at all these places. Many of the young girls and the young boys who don't go to higher education, they are in these companies. So it's the quality of the graduates we produce meshed with the quality of the work environment. We, with all our knowledge, with all our academicians, with all our plans, we have not resolved that. I mentioned this is just in passing. It was stated about the merging of the ministries, one ministry, two ministries. Actually, it's a number of ministries which are really involved in education. It doesn't really matter whether it's Ministry of Higher Education or Ministry of Education. We have the Women's Ministry, for instance. There are more women in the universities, in the various disciplines, than men. An emerging problem. Women have to settle to marry men who are less educated than them. It's an emerging, evolving problem. Unless, of course, there's some kind of intervention. And people are analyzing it, but not deeply. And there are no elegant solutions yet. And so we have our plans and we move forward. The quality journey in Malaysia was really not driven by the private sector. It was actually driven by the public sector. It was the government sector which drove the quality control circles, KMK, quality control, quality assurance, total quality management, and then we went into the ISO mode. And in the teaching field, we focused on, I mentioned the Inspectorate of Schools, we focus on teacher standards, etc. And now we are at the MQA, which has global relations, which is placing us competitively, globally, in terms of the quality agenda. We are about global leadership, but then when we talk about our quality, there are the tangibles and the intangibles. One of the intangibles must be education must liberate, and we use the term liberation, education must liberate trapped minds, culturally trapped minds, academic silos which trap minds. So one intangible, but actually really tangible, is about teaching skills, etc., is liberating the trapped minds. This is one of the agenda which should be the quality agenda. We have the, it has emerged, but it has not really emerged as a political movement which is accepted by the broadest range of elites in the country. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the Malay language. Whether the model forward is English and Malay, or Malay dominant, or English dominant, or when we open up the country to the outside world, whether the elite groups will, in the not too far future in front, insist that foreign students who come to Malaysia study in the Malay language, not in the English language. So these are issues which are real, but which we have not resolved. Supply and demand. Yeah, 7 billion human beings with over 200 million thirsty for knowledge. And who are the people who come here? The people who come here at the moment are from China. Well, China has decided that 300 million Chinese will master the English language because Americans are relatively monolingual, except for Spanish. They have over 300 million, and out of the 1-point-something billion Indians, over 300 million master English. So anyway, China has decided that over 300, it's going to be the second language of China, over 300 million will master English. Now this is another kind of knowledge out there which we have to understand if we want to go into the competitive world. But who comes to Malaysia for higher education? They are the Chinese and they are the Iranians, more Iranians. In fact, proportionately, in terms of percentage, than the Arabs, vis-a-vis their population. Why? Oh, it's for us to know. Indonesians, and what's the background, what's the profile of Indonesians who come to Malaysia? And of course, people from African states, and also people from ASEAN. Not too many from ASEAN come over. Not too many from Philippines, for instance, or Vietnam. Why? So we go out and export our education, but the people who come to Malaysia, we have to understand. Australia, for instance, has just decided it wants more Australians to go out and study abroad. Particularly, Malaysia is sort of preferred. But that policy is not because we market our programs well. That's because of the policies in the home country. And so these are things, we do not have people, we do not really at one point of time have experts in the economics of education or experts in comparative and global and international education. So we don't understand all this goings on elsewhere. It's only the marketing people who go and market. And so we have all these people here going to 100,000 and more, and we talk about bringing about 5 billion to Malaysian annually, but we do not know the profiles of all these people who come over here, but we have faith that we are helping them go back and develop their countries. That's the supply and demand. But the most important perhaps, and the most exciting perhaps, are the homegrown Malaysian degree programs. Yes, the public universities have the homegrown Malaysian degree programs, but the private universities, almost all of them, and as I mentioned earlier, there are more private university lecturers and students than public universities. But private universities have franchise programs, partners, programs from abroad implemented here in very exciting modalities, 3+1, 2, or 3+0 and 2+1 and etc. And Malaysia is a leader in this kind of thing. Now, the thrust of moving forward of the multidisciplinary drives of curriculum change is not happening. People are still in the academic silos. We are not crossing over. In many Australian universities, they used to have law and pharmacy. In the University of Malaya, they used to have double major, biochemistry, etc. And when Dato Sri Najib was the Minister of Education, he was encouraging that people who do Islamic studies do also computer studies so that they are employable. We are still in the silos of particular degree programs, and almost every university in the country, at every Senate meeting, and at every Lembaga Pengurus University LPU meeting, they are putting forward new degree programs, diploma programs, and all kinds of programs, producing more and more graduates, but not much matching with the world of work. Almost every department wants to move forward. Both Professor Hamidin in a way and Tan Sri Abu Hassan Othman, he was mentioning, and Professor Khoo Kim, of course, those nostalgic days of the past when we were once young and we enjoyed the powerful minds of those professors, Jan Pluvier, Wang Ganggu, Takdir Ali Shabana, and all those fellows of that real intellectual stature. Now we have a problem. We tried to solve our problem. We have MPW, Mata Pelajaran Wajib. And then now we have decided we are going to have GES, General Education Subjects. And then we had Tamadun Islam. And then we went on to say Tamadun Islam dan Asia. And then for the most part, in most of these universities, where all the students must study all the subjects, we put the youngest, most inexperienced lecturers to teach the subject. Here is an opportunity where the top academicians and intellectuals of the country can teach everyone of the students who come to the university. And yet, our decision is to give that responsibility to the youngest and the most experienced, and we are not putting people like Professor Khoo Kim or Tan Sri Abu Hassan to come and teach all of this. Just imagine the strategic paradigm mindset change when those programs are taught by the top academicians and intellectuals in the country compared to now. Then many of the things that we are frustrated about may be resolved. Blueprints and blueprints. Malaysia is an expert for planning and planning and planning, strategic plans, strategic trust, blueprints. And we always imagine that blueprints take on the reverence of the Constitution and worse still of the holy books. Whereas plans are evolving plans. They are ongoing. They must be changed. They are not static. They must all the time be changed. But because of the media, which does not understand the nature of planning and the nature of muddling through, the nature of tinkering, we give reverence to things which must not stay static, but which must change. We also, and I'm sure Tan Sri Professor will look into this, we also get confused about teaching methods. We are beginning, and some leaders who have no background in pedagogy, andragogy, and teaching and learning, etc., believe in outcome-based education, and then one method fits all for all subjects, for all disciplines, for all levels, when actually the teaching, learning methods and the assessment methods are over a very, very wide range of exciting possibilities of blended learning. But then when powers that be, and in this case the elites in the various ministries say, these are the methods and these are the 3 or 5 objectives which must be run. So education becomes the uniformity of knowledge and information and of teaching methodologies, and not of the excitement of liberating trapped minds and liberating the creative instincts. We talk about innovation, creativity. No, but we are stuck on imitation and innovation. We have really not gone into invention, etc. So that's my point number 10, 11. And finally, inclusiveness. We're just thinking, we're just beginning a rhetoric, at the level of rhetoric, but no reality, because we transfer to education what happens in politics, the Sanze art of war, and the political culture of spin doctors, of mercenaries, and of the merchants of doubt. All these political strategies and ideas are transferred to academia when politicians lead discussions, and academic leaders who surrender to the minds and the agenda of politicians buy into the register of language of politics, and we lose the integrity of the truth-seeking educational enterprise, and to the human potentialities development thrust of what academia is all about. And more to say, but we're going to have an exciting 30 minutes of discussion. Thank you.